Look what the Kashmiris are facing and the way they are in that siege, the largest siege which the Meme said, of course. But the way they've been, you can say, enclosed in a sort of prison where they cannot come out of their street or even their houses because they have deployed almost about 900,000 troops. And they are in the streets, they are in every nook and corner of the, especially the Muslim population of the Delhi. So once we see it, so this day will be coming sooner or later. And the day they commit this mistake by using force, brutal force in the street and spilling the blood, I suppose that will be the day of change in the Kashmir. For the reason, because that milestone will be crossed. And once that milestone, that restraint is crossed, and we are seeing that India is slowly going towards that direction for the reason that they are committing mistakes. And such sort of mistake committed by India is giving momentum to the freedom struggle as well as giving a chance to Pakistan to exploit that situation. So I must say that Pakistan must be vigilant on this aspect. If it happens, what is supposed to be done on the international diplomatic arena as well as on the political arena, and mostly what sort of support we will be extending, and more so what the people of Jammu and the Azad Kashmir and the Gilgit-Baltistan will be responding. So all these things is to be kept in mind. Second thing is, the way India is moving, so those loose balls which are giving on this human rights violation as well as this lawfare as well as this lockdown of the people, and more so this international agreement which they are throwing out of the window. So we should also be considering that whether similar agreement after this map is relevant or not, because no more LFC exists. And if the LFC doesn't exist, if the line of ceasefire, and if the line of ceasefire, that has got a different definition. And
anyway, tomorrow is a big day. Let's hope everything goes fine. But as far as the achievement of Modi is concerned, I think that's a joke and a half. He has been an absolute failure in that particular issue. 1 year has passed, and as our Prime Minister always say that they will keep on having this curfews and they will keep on having the restrictions on the people of Kashmir, because if they'll come out, things would be different. Anyway, I'll see you tomorrow. Till then, you take good care of yourself. Thank you very much, Brigadier Saab. Thank you very much, Dr. Saiba, and it was a pleasure having you, Ambassador Saab. Khuda Hafiz.
कश्मीर से जबरदस्ती उनको निकाला गया। आज सवाल ये है कि अगर अक़वाम मुत्तहिदा और वो तमाम कुव्वतें खामोश रहीं तो ये क्या तारीख हमें बताती नहीं कि लीग ऑफ नेशन जब फेल हुआ तो यूरोप में और पूरी दुनिया में, और फिर उसकी बेहतरीन मिसाल खुदा न खास्ता हिरोशिमा नागासाकी है। तो आज पाकिस्तान का पार्लियामान न सिर्फ आपके थ्रू बल्कि सोशल मीडिया के थ्रू, हर फोरम के थ्रू दुनिया को ये बावर कराना चाहता है कि ये सिर्फ और सिर्फ इंसानियत की बात है, ये सिर्फ और सिर्फ इंसानी हकूक की बात है, ये सिर्फ और सिर्फ आज के दौर में अपनी गासिबाना पॉलिसियों को जस्टिफाई करने के लिए जो इंसानों और इंसानियत के साथ ये जो ड्रामा और इंसानों की इज्जतों के जो जनाजे निकाल रहे मोदी, इस हवाले से पार्लियामान ने बहुत जबरदस्त इनिशिएटिव लिए। उसकी बेहतरीन मिसाल आज पहली दफा पाकिस्तान की तारीख में पाकिस्तान का पॉलिटिकल नक्शा, जिसमें मुख्तलिफ वो जो आवाजें थी, जो मुख्तलिफ खदशात थे, अब अल्हम्दुलिल्लाह वो भी खत्म हुए। प्राइम मिनिस्टर और पूरी टीम और पार्लियामान के तमाम पॉलिटिकल पार्टीज कश्मीर पे मुत्तफिक हैं आज आपको दावत देने का, और आज आपको पार्लियामान से ये बात पूरी दुनिया को पहुंचाने के लिए आज इस अज़म का जो इरादा किया पूरे पार्लियामान में, इसका एक मकसद है कि कश्मीर पे ना कभी कॉम्प्रोमाइज हो सकता है। कश्मीर के लिए हर लेवल पर, कश्मीर में मकबूजा कश्मीर के अलावा दुनिया में जहां पे भी निहत्ते मासूम बेगुनाह लोग, और सबसे बढ़कर दुनिया का ये सबसे हैरान कुन मकबूजा कश्मीर के हालात हैं, उसकी बेहतरीन मिसाल 9 लाख फौज, उसके अगेंस्ट वो लोग निहत्ते मासूम, उनके हाथ में कुछ नहीं, लेकिन वो ना बिक रहे हैं ना झुक रहे हैं, और उनका अज़म और उनका इरादा क्या है कि वो शहादत को तरजीह दे रहे हैं। तो आज एक दफा फिर पार्लियामेंट ने एक प्रोएक्टिव अप्रोच के जरिए दुनिया के सामने अपना केस रखा है, और इंशाअल्लाह ये सिलसिला चलता रहेगा। पूरी दुनिया के ऐवानों में, मुख्तलिफ फोरम्स पे हम कश्मीरी डायस्पोरा और खासकर दुनिया के सामने कश्मीर का मुकदमा रखेंगे, और मेरे रब के फजल से नाउमीदी गुनाह कुफर है। आज यहाँ से आवाज मकबूजा कश्मीर के जवानों, माओ बहनों और बच्चों और मासूमों और यतीमों नादारों को पहुंचेगी। आज यहाँ से आवाज कश्मीरी डायस्पोरा को, आज यहाँ से आवाज आजाद कश्मीर, गिलगित बल्तिस्तान, बल्कि दुनिया के हर कोने में पहुंचेगी कि पाकिस्तान न कभी कॉम्प्रोमाइज कर सकता है और न पाकिस्तान कभी उनको की कुर्बानियां भूल सकता है। इंशाअल्लाह बिइज़्निल्लाह कश्मीर हकीकत बनने जा रहा है, और उसमें अफवाज पाकिस्तान, तमाम सिविल सोसाइटी, तमाम पॉलिटिकल पार्टीज, पार्लियामान की तमाम पार्टियां और हुकूमत वक्त, ये सब एक पेज पे हैं। इंशाअल्लाह कश्मीर हकीकत बनेगा। अल्लाह तमाम इंसानियत का हामी नासिर हो। आजाद कश्मीर, मकबूजा कश्मीर, लद्दाख, गिलगित बल्तिस्तान, खासकर तमाम इंसानियत और बिलखुसूस पाकिस्तान जिंदाबाद और हमेशा पाइंदाबाद। थैंक यू सो मच।
Marks the one-year completion of unlawful Indian actions, taking away the special status of the occupied valley by revoking Article 370 of the Indian Constitution, and with an intention to change the demographics of the Muslim-majority region, Modi-led central government in New Delhi also rescinded Article 35A. The day also marks 1 year of brutal shutdown in the Indian-occupied Kashmir, which has crippled life for the common man. Although the curfew in the Indian-occupied Kashmir was aimed to stifle any opposition which could rise in the wake of unlawful and dastardly Indian actions, it has only further strengthened the Kashmiri resolve to seek freedom from Indian occupation. Kashmiris living on either side of line of control are observing the day with a firm resolve that no Indian atrocity will silence the Kashmiri voice and struggle.
The Act of Indian Parliament of the 5th of August 2019 was the violation of international law. I believe that if there is something wrong and people of Jammu and Kashmir are continuously struggling against that wrong, I have a faith.
Time for Isha prayers in Rawalpindi, Islamabad. People in other parts of the country may offer their prayers according to their local timings.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمد رسول الله أشهد أن محمد رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله
اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد
Sayings of the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. He who does not respect elders, does not have mercy on children, does not commend what is good, and does not forbid what is evil, is not one of us.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum and a very warm welcome to PTV World News. I'm Shadad Qayyum with the top stories of this hour. Prime Minister Imran Khan unveils the political map of Pakistan. International borders clearly defined in the new map. Prime Minister Imran Khan says the Indian government's revocation of Article 370 in August last year turned the Indian-occupied Jammu and Kashmir into an open-air prison. In an interview with Al Jazeera, Prime Minister Imran Khan says the territory has been closed off and its economy is destroyed. Supreme Court directs that a copy of the Judicial Inquiry Report of Army Public School Peshawar attack be provided to Attorney General as Court expressed resolve to take the case to its logical conclusion. All-Parties Conference on Kashmir held at Foreign Office. Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi says Pakistan exposed India's ongoing human rights violations in Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir before the world. Pakistan will observe Kashmir Siege Day tomorrow to mark the first anniversary of India's illegal action of scraping the special constitutional status of Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, Prime Minister Imran Khan will address the Azad Jammu and Kashmir Legislative Assembly. Police Martyrs Day is being observed today to honor brave fighters of the nation and express solidarity with their families. Global death toll from COVID-19 infections rises to over 696,800, while confirmed cases pass 18.4 million. Over 11.6 million patients so far recovered from the disease. Well, that's all for the moment. For more details on live streaming, log on to our website world.ptv.com.pk. You can find us on Facebook page with the name of PTV World and follow us on Twitter at WorldPTV. Thanks a lot for watching, and it's goodbye for now.
Few days back, as all were in the lockdown, so everybody is getting through with the mental sickness and all that. So what about those people who are suffering from years and years and from last 70 plus years? So I strongly condemn that, and I believe, and I raise this question from those flagship holders who talk about that they are the very much big flag holders of human rights, that the way of Kashmiris' human rights are getting violated. I think it's a very important, now it's very important, I think, that they should open up their eyes and they'll feel. And about asking about India, or like Modi, I think he is not a human. For me, he is more than a demon.
I want to reassure the people of Jammu and Kashmir and the Kashmiris living in Azad Kashmir that every Pakistani is standing by you. You're fighting for a just cause. The right to self-determination is a promise which is yet to be fulfilled. The people of Pakistan stand with you. You're fortunate to have Imran Khan as your ambassador. And I want to reassure you that I will be your spokesperson as long as your leadership is incarcerated and is not free to express itself. India must lift sanctions. India must provide basic fundamental rights to the people of occupied Jammu and Kashmir. We will stand by you. We know, I am convinced that this tyranny and abuse of human rights will not break your resolve. It hasn't broken your resolve in the last so many decades. The last 7 decades, you have stood up for your right, and inshallah, you will continue to stand up for your rights, and you will succeed. This is part of my iman. You will succeed, and inshallah, that day is near when you will attain the right to self-determination, and you will be free from the yoke of Indian occupation.
United States President Donald Trump's visit to India on February 24, 2020 was widely considered as a failed trip. It just produced a series of small deals in arms, energy, and nuclear cooperation. However, it failed to produce large or transformative agreements to advance the US-India strategic partnership that was aimed by India. The signing of a widely expected mini-trade deal on which negotiators from both countries have worked for months was absent during the president's visit. India has committed to procure $3 billion worth of defense equipment. However, the agreement is itself recycled from an earlier procurement tendered in 2009. Indian observers were disappointed by the lack of substantive engagement on continued technologies for nuclear energy production. During the visit, India has witnessed the worst outbreak of communal violence in the country in decades, especially in New Delhi. Split-screen news coverage of riots in India's capital during the US President's visit, providing a striking visual of the internal contradictions currently roiling India and of the challenges in engaging India as a strategic partner during this decisive period. Shabbir Ahmed Wagra, PTV World.
It's a question of blinded children.
It's a question of international law.
It's a question of Kashmir's future.
It's a question of illegal settlement.
When it comes to Kashmir and especially this draconian approach of Nazi's Modi, where he has bullied human rights.
The 5th of August 2019 was an Armageddon for Kashmir.
It's a question of criminal silence of the international community.
If you are a Kashmiri and living in Kashmir, you no longer have the right of being a Kashmiri. They violated their own Indian constitution because this was the only legal link between India and Kashmir.
It was Pakistan who has to go around and knock at every door and tell the people that this is not the internal issue. RSS being a terrorist organization needs to be declared a terrorist organization by Pakistani Parliament.
It's a known fact that Kashmir has been the major bone of contention between Pakistan and India. However, a major turn of events took place when the ruling Bharatiya Janata Party government scrapped the special status granted to the Indian-occupied Jammu and Kashmir under Article 370 and 35A, which was part of the BJP's party manifesto. Now, revocation of Article 370 and 35A brought Kashmir to a standstill. Educational institutions were shut, business establishments were closed down, strict curfew was imposed, heavy deployment of army troops was seen in every nook and corner of the territory. In addition to that, 2 union territories were made, that's Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh. The move sparked widespread anger, which was met with a brutal response from India's military, detention of political activists and civilians, suspension of all democratic rights, and a media blackout of the valley. Voice of Kashmir was raised on all fora, especially by Pakistan, so that the muffled voices of Kashmiris may reach the entire world. India made sure it smothered Kashmiris in every way possible, as even the basic services like cellular networks and internet were snapped in the territory so that no news would come in or go out. A few journalists, both local and foreign, did manage to report what was actually happening in Indian-occupied Kashmir, which led to an international outcry. After 7 months, India was compelled to partially restore internet facility in Kashmir under pressure from international human rights groups. For 7 months, people were forbidden from leaving their homes. Deadly clashes between troops and anti-India protesters kept on erupting in the streets intermittently. Now, it's pertinent to mention here that the irony lies in the fact that India calls itself the biggest democracy in the world, yet the basic human rights and basic human values are being blown to smithereens in the occupied territory. Pakistan has been trying its utmost to create awareness among the world leaders and masses alike as to what the actual face of India is. In the first quarter of 2020, lockdown phenomenon started all over the world due to COVID-19, and that trickled down to reach Kashmir as well. This double lockdown frustrated the people in Kashmir who were already living in an open prison. Coronavirus fight in Kashmir was also obstructed due to limited access to the internet. Now, the territory uses 2G internet service, which does not exist anywhere else in the world due to its extremely slow speed. The service is only available if and when the internet is working. Indian authorities have cut online access in Kashmir multiple times since it was partially restored. This has even affected the doctors who were not able to read the emerging guidelines which were released by the WHO. Things in Indian-occupied Kashmir have gone from bad to worse after revocation of Article 370 and 35A, along with the outbreak of coronavirus pandemic. During this year, the feeling of alienation has become worse, anger has become stronger, cynicism has become more pronounced, and the sense that India wants to quash and humiliate Kashmiris has become stronger. Kashmiris now await the long-delayed justice to free them from the strong and brutal clutches of India.
Hello and welcome to Politics Today. I'm Farrukh Pitafi. Today we are going to talk about 5th of August, Yom-e-Istisal, the day when India unilaterally decided to scuttle its arrangement with Indian-occupied Kashmir, and that is not all. The way they did it is actually laughing in the face of constitutionalism around the world and human rights as well. Particularly, I'm calling it India's one-sided unilateral attempt to scuttle the arrangement, because remember, Pakistan never agreed upon this kind of arrangement. But India, the way it actually did it is astounding. Article 370 had to be cancelled, it had to be amended, Article 35A had to be cancelled or amended. And how did they do it? The Article 370 actually says that Constituent Assembly can change the nature of Article 370, but that Constituent Assembly has actually ceased to exist since 1950s. So what do we do? The second thing was there was a possibility of a legislative assembly, and they even didn't have it because BJP decided to impose presidential rule in the occupied territory. After that, they had to go and amend Article 367 that actually stated or gave the status of Constituent Assembly to the unelected government there. Since then, because it happened last year and today is exactly 365th day of what happened. Since then, we have seen India has actually waged a war on people of Kashmir. That is not all. Tomorrow, when there is the anniversary of the first anniversary of scuttling of Article 370 and annexation of Kashmir, Indian government is actually launching inaugurating the Ram Janambhoomi temple that will stand where Babri Mosque stood for centuries. And what does the message tell you? What is the message here? What they are doing at the place of Babri Mosque, they are going to do with Kashmir as well. They are replacing Muslims, they are replacing minorities with Hindu symbolism, Hindutva symbolism, and also with majoritarian culture. We are going to talk about all these matters and more to understand what is going on right now in Kashmir and why the world is silent at this moment. I'm joined by two guests in the studio. Two will join us on Skype. In the studio, I'm joined by Brigadier Retired Dr. Saif Malik, who is founding director of India Studies Center, and also a teacher of mine. Thank you very much, sir, for being part of the program. Next to him is Altaf Zanwani Sahab, senior leader of All Parties Hurriyat Conference Kashmir. Thank you very much, sir, for being part of the program. But later, the moment I'm joined by the other guests on Skype, I'm going to introduce them. But Brigadier Sahab, Dr. Sahab, let me start with you. Let me ask you, why is it that despite the fact that India calls itself a democracy, and we have seen that India actually not only broke all the canons of decency or human rights, but it also actually went against its own constitution. Why is it that India, which claims to be a democracy, its Supreme Court has been silent on the matter? Why is it that its parliament has seems to be so craven that over one night they passed the entire bill and rammed it into everybody's faces?
Thank you for asking such a important question. Once we look at the history and the genesis of the issue, so this colonization process was started right 70 years plus ago. Thereafter, which India has been ever claiming to be biggest democracy, pluralistic, secular society, having this all standing in the world, this is also being questioned now at the moment.
Right.
Because all the yardsticks which they were claiming are now questionable. And secondly, what all they did, they did not do it just overnight. They planned it, and especially under the Modi government. And which is, you very rightly mentioned that they are inspired by the Hindutva ideology,
Right.
which is ultimately leading to Akhand Bharat.
Right.
So this posture basically provoked them to go for those measures which are against the international laws,
Right.
those which are against the Fourth Geneva Convention, which are against the rationality, reasoning, and you very rightly mentioned even the Indian Constitution,
Right.
their code, that is again questionable. So their mindset basically provoked them for all such activities.
Right. Dr. Saab, it is said that Churchill during the Second World War actually returned from the front to his base or his country. And there he asked, somebody said whether we are winning or losing. And he said, are the courts functioning properly? And when he was told, yes, they are, he said, okay, then we are a democracy and no one can defeat us. So if India's Supreme Court is not functioning, do you think that India still stays a democracy, right?
I think this question lead me to Khashwant Singh, what he said in 2013.
Right.
He has also questioned all these things, that all these yardsticks,
Right.
where justice is not prevailing, then the future of India is questionable, and they are heading to a big disaster, because once justice is not existing, then the integration of the state is again questionable at the moment.
Right. Let me welcome the third guest who joins us on Skype, Michael Kugelman, Senior South Asia Expert, joins us on Skype. Michael, thank you very much for joining us. Let me first ask one of my guests in the studio, and then I'm coming to you, Michael. Altaf Hussain Bani Sahab, let me ask you about Article 35A. Because India, BJP has been talking about Article 370 for quite some time. But 35A was something that was added to their manifesto recently. And there seemed to be some kind of intent to demographically change the valley's population. Now the question is, since then they have actually come up with the various laws to change the demography as well. Now tell us what exactly is the state of affairs on ground there?
You see, first of all, as Brigadier Sahab also spoke about it, and you in the intro also spoke about it, that Article 370 is the article of the Indian Constitution,
Right.
while as the state of Jammu and Kashmir, Indian-occupied Jammu and Kashmir, had its own constitution.
Right.
So that constitution, there was a law which was established in 1922 by then Maharaja of Kashmir, that permanent residency certificate in Kashmir, that state subjects, only the people who live in Kashmir, they can own the land and they can have their voting rights and other rights, property rights in Kashmir.
And what did it do? It ensured the quantum of population.
Yeah.
Complexion of the population.
Complexion of population. It was at that time. It was because of the Dogras and Kashmiri Pandits who pleaded to the Maharaja that there is an influx of the Indians from other side to the Jammu and other areas. Thereby, they are going to lose their land and they will lose their jobs in the state. And that is why the Maharaja initiated this. It was not at that time for the Muslims.
So, Article 35A it is cancelled, and then they bring in this domicile law.
Yeah, what they did, they just amended Article 370 and then abrogated Article 35A of the Indian Constitution, which was included in the Constitution later on. And what they did later on, first of all, they dismembered the state in the two union territories, Kashmir and Ladakh, and then over the period of time, on 1st of April, they introduced a new domicile law. This domicile law is a very dangerous law for the people of Kashmir. As now, those who have lived in Kashmir for 15 years, they are entitled for a domicile in Kashmir. They can get a domicile certificate, and they are entitled to purchase the land. They are entitled to have the jobs over Kashmir. They are entitled to own any property.
And they can crowd the local population out.
Yeah, that's
because they are being hunted by the authorities.
Number two is that those people, the Indian personals who have worked in Kashmir, the army personals and civil bureaucracy, and all those who have worked with their children, who have passed class 12th and class 10th exam in Kashmir, they are entitled to it. Till date, they have issued over 400,000 domicile certificates. And as if now, about 1,700,000 people are entitled to have these domicile certificates, and it means it's 1/4 of the population of Indian occupied Kashmir, which will be coming as settlers from the India, and most of them are the Hindu settlers, and the Hindu settlers will come in Kashmir and will make the influx in Kashmir.
So exactly, if tomorrow they are celebrating the inauguration of Ram Janambhoomi temple, there is a message.
There's a clear message. There's a clear message. They said we have conquered the Kashmir on 5th of August. We have integrated the Kashmir on 5th of August. They say we have dismantled the Babri Masjid and built the Ram Mandir. This is what the BJP or RSS promised to the people of India: one nation, one flag, and one culture.
Right, but this is a kind of annexation of people and their souls as well. Let me bring in Michael Kugelman here. Michael, you are listening to the participants, but of course you have been looking at the symbolism that is going on. The question right now is, does it worry anybody in the foreign capitals, in the US capital, elsewhere, that India, that has somewhere between 1.3 or 1.4 billion people or population of that size, might be actually heading to fascism?
I think that quietly, privately, there is some concern about how aggressively India has pursued this Hindutva strategy since the BJP government was re-elected in 2019. But I really don't think that those notions, those fears of fascism and of India being an expansionist power with designs on taking over territory, that is not an argument that gets much support in the capitals that I'm aware of and that I follow. I just don't think that's there. As you know, the optics or the lens through which India is viewed is very different from the lens through which it's viewed in Pakistan. India, is seen as an important country that is one that should be engaged, and in that sense, it's viewed as certainly a messy democracy, a democracy that's experiencing a fair amount of backsliding, and one that has certainly exhibited authoritarian tendencies, particularly as it rolls out this Hindu nationalist agenda. But this idea of India trying to, having designs on changing borders and being revisionist and things like that, there is certainly not a view that that's the direction that India is going in. I'm speaking generally here. And it seems the country that, against the backdrop of a rapidly worsening U.S.-China relationship, is a country that's important to partner with, to try to balance out that growing role and power of China in the region. This is how the U.S. and its allies look at India, particularly, again, in the context of this worsening U.S.-China rivalry. So, it's a very different optic. It's a very different lens.
Right. And since we are talking about, democracies that actually are very influential, I'm talking about Europe, I'm talking about U.S., And certainly part of that worldview is human rights as well. When we look at a little toddler who is sitting atop the body of his dead grandfather, how does it play out in the West? Does it show what is going on in Kashmir, and do people actually follow what is going on in Kashmir right now?
Well, certainly the international media and the human rights community, civil society members that are concerned and interested in human rights issues, absolutely, they're very concerned. They've been watching. But I would argue that the large amount of attention and criticism that came out from the international media and also from foreign governments, including legislatures and all, that was quite stark in the days and weeks after the repeal of Article 370. Though I would argue that the world has become a lot more quiet, has not really been fixated on this issue as much as it had been. Obviously, over the last 3-4 months, that's in great part because of the pandemic, which has become this all-encompassing issue, certainly here in the United States, that has really reduced bandwidth and policy space when it comes to looking at the situation in Kashmir. So, as I think I've told you before on this show, unless the red lines were to be crossed, unless India were to engage in a preemptive aggressive action in terms of what it might do to make a claim to Pakistan-administered Kashmir or Gilgit-Baltistan, unless India were to do something like that, which would be perceived as revisionist activities that would suggest that India is no longer a status quo state, unless that type of thing happens, I don't think that the perspective is going to change, and especially since there's so many other things happening too on a very practical level, like the pandemic.
That's absolutely right. Michael, I'm going to come back to you. Do stay with us. Let me bring in the fourth guest who joins us on telephone, Ambassador Zamir Akram, a career diplomat, a prolific writer, an intellectual of renown, joins us on telephone. Thank you very much, sir, for being part of the program. Ambassador, sir, we are talking about India, the first anniversary of India's re-annexation of Kashmir. Do you think that today Pakistan has been able to actually communicate its message and highlight the Kashmir issue all over the world?
I think by and large Pakistan has been successful in doing that, but I must say that I think it's the people of Kashmir themselves to whom the credit should go, because they have survived for a year under very, very difficult circumstances, under a lockdown now that has lasted for a year. We have only spent a few months of this kind of coronavirus lockdown, and we know what it feels. But in occupied Kashmir, that's not just a lockdown that is voluntary. It's an enforced lockdown with the military behind it, with 900,000 soldiers behind it. So the credit goes to them for withstanding this kind of Indian brutality and repression. And the world has not ignored this fact. Of course, time has elapsed and other things have come up, including this corona pandemic. But still, the international community, particularly the international media, remains focused on what is happening in Indian occupied Kashmir. And I think that the Indians have made the situation worse by their reoccupation. I would say it is a reoccupation of Kashmir. By, well, first of all, antagonizing the entire Kashmiri nation. It's none of the Kashmiris who were pro-Indian at one point are now on the same line with the Indians. In fact, they are also talking about freedom or azadi from India. The other point is that they already have created, the problems with Pakistan have become worse, as we saw during the February limited military exchange, which the Indians know was a befitting response to their aggression. So that option again is something that they cannot try to use against Pakistan, because they will get the same kind of response. And then, worst of all for them, they have instigated this
confrontation with China in Ladakh, and that now China is the fourth active party to the Kashmir dispute. Apart from the Kashmiris, Pakistan and India, now China is the fourth active participant in the Kashmir dispute. So all along, in this 1 year, India's situation has worsened vis-a-vis Kashmir. It has not improved.
Right. But Ambassador Saab, I remember last time you were in the show, I asked you about Kautilya and his worldview, and perhaps the Indian government might be following in those steps. You said that it wasn't the case because India has not been able to divide and conquer. And not only that, you know, the authors like Paul Kennedy and others actually tell us that when countries offend everybody, when there is an imperial overreach, countries basically implode. But it seems somehow that whatever India does, India is poking the dragon on one side, alienating the entire neighborhood, and simultaneously alienating own people. And yet there doesn't seem to be any comeuppance here. Why do you think that is the case?
I think that there is, I mean, these things take time. I mean, history, the wheels of history take time to grind, and but 1 year is not a sufficient period to judge how this will play out. But certainly, as I said, as I pointed out, the ingredients for India's difficulties vis-a-vis Kashmir and vis-a-vis this entire region, in fact, are already there. I mean, you mentioned the Indian attempts to isolate Pakistan in the past. Actually, it is India which is isolated today. It is not only... Not only as a problem.
Do stay with us. Let me go back to the other participants. Then I'm going to come back to you, sir. Dr. Saif Malik, sir. You are the pioneer, founder of the first India Study Center in Islamabad. Let me ask you, if you are following what is going on in India, and if you see the world through Narendra Modi's eyes, what is India's next play here? Because we see there is a very strong fascistic symbolism that is at play.
Basically, it has two dimensions, internal dimension and external dimensions as well. Once we look at the internal dimension, what they are going to do, they are going to marginalize all those forces and to silence all those voices, which are the voices of reason and the rationality, what they are going to do this. Secondly, the real stance, which was that this Kashmir issue has to be settled and resolved as per the aspirations of the people through plebiscite, as that is on the UN agenda.
Right.
As that Rani Sahib just has mentioned, that once the demographics of the Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir is altered and changed, when the majority is turned into minority, then they will certainly going to approach UN. Well, in 1948, you have asked for that we will decide the fate of Kashmir based on the plebiscite.
But now, let me go back to what Michael Kugelman was saying earlier. He says that the world is not going to notice what India is doing unless India goes for some more kinetic change or dynamic change, like renegotiating borders, like attacking other countries. Do you think that that phase is also approaching?
I don't think that kinetic means or mode will be effective at the moment. India is not in a position to go for that, though they have already kept this LOC always under fire.
Right.
They already had the issue with China.
Not only LOC, Chinese border is before you. Then Bangladesh border is, and Nepal.
Nepal is there. So basically, India's attitude, which is aggressive towards its all neighbors. So once this aggressive posture cannot bring peace and stability in the region.
Right.
So this is a big question on the Indian policy maker, that whether they are going for the friendly neighbors or they are going for the confrontation.
Right.
So the passage of
Indian government definitely doesn't want peace on its borders because it wants to eventually expand. And we are talking about Narendra Modi. Allow me to bring in Vani Sahib once again because we have seen, sir, Narendra Modi, first 5 years was a different man. And since he has been re-elected, he has aggressively pursued Hindutva policies. Do you think that these 5 years are going to be spent on consolidating what he has done, and then next 5 years they are going to start attacking the neighbors, or it can come earlier?
Yeah, I think the way Narendra Modi started in India, his rule,
right?
He came up with an agenda of development in India at that time. He said that I'm going to make the India
Gujarat
model economy and all that.
Unless he was talking about 2002 massacre of Muslims.
But even at that time, in their manifesto, there was to abrogate Article 370 and strip the autonomy of Jammu and Kashmir, integrate Jammu and Indian occupied Kashmir into Indian Union.
Right.
And also the Ram Mandir was also on the top of the table even at that time.
Right.
But having the power and he was there, but in the election campaign for the next election, he rigorously advocated for the abrogation of Article 370 and Ram Mandir and also targeted Pakistan for terrorism and all that, and thereby accumulated the vote of Hindu radicalists in India, and thereby got an overwhelming majority, which was not expected at that time. The people say in India at that time, when the 27th thing happened, though they lost, but they celebrated that pilot. They said, oh, we got the pilot in one day from Pakistan.
You're talking about 2019.
Abhinandan. They could not hold it for one day. So, and this is Narendra Modi, who can do Modi matters and all that. And by then he got the overwhelming majority. When he got the overwhelming majority, the opposition was marginalized. They were not in a position to challenge him on any front.
Marginalized or challenged? Today, Priyanka Gandhi is welcoming Ram Janam Bhoomi.
That's it. Now they are also fearing that if they will challenge it, they won't get the votes tomorrow. So they have become.
So are you telling me that Mother India, that used to be so pluralistic and all-inclusive, is gone?
That is gone. That Mother India
now it is only Hindu majority.
Citizenship Amendment Act (NCRA) that has already marginalized the Muslims in India. They are already marginalized. They will be sown in the concentration camps. In the third term, the only thing which the Modi has is that the expansion of the borders.
Right.
That is the only way he can win the other election. So
you agree with my basic thesis?
That
he will keep on pushing.
He will keep on pushing. He will keep on.
Right. Let me go back to Michael Kugelman. Michael, let me ask you, because you focus on South Asia, let me ask you, what do you think is Narendra Modi's play here? Is it basically only an appeal to majoritarianism, which might be temporary, or India's society and India's politics in the region are structurally changing right now?
Well, I think that it would be incorrect to say that these authoritarian tendencies, this Hindutva thing, majoritarian politics, that this is new and that this is a Modi thing. I think that we all would agree that India has seen a fair amount of communal tensions and communal violence throughout its history, despite this notion of Indian exceptionalism, where you would have such diversity coming together to coexist. I mean, that has been true, but there has at the same time been a fair amount of communal tension. But certainly it's gotten worse over the last few years, and that's because, quite frankly, the Modi government has really institutionalized Hindu nationalism and all of the ugliness that comes with that. So in terms of where things are going, I think it's full speed ahead on this agenda. The fact that even despite this horrific pandemic, which has hit India very hard, and despite this its worst economic slowdown in a number of years, it's continued to push out these new policies, including the domicile laws that were mentioned earlier, that suggests to me that there's, this government still has a lot of momentum, and it wants to maintain that momentum for pushing forward this agenda. And I think that it'll be important politically for the government to do that, because it knows that it's going to have to tackle this economic challenge. It knows that it's going to have to recover from this pandemic, which has been so deadly in India. It could find itself a bit vulnerable, and so naturally it would want to fall back on these policies that are wildly popular among the rank and file of the ruling party, and it would want to distract its supporters from all these struggles happening, the economic struggles, the health struggles, and the struggles of the Indian government to address these struggles. So I think there's some pretty troubling times ahead for India in that regard. I don't really think it's going to slow down. I don't think it's going to lose momentum. So I think that's what we're going to see. But at the same time, it'll try to continue doing other things, like furthering its foreign policy to build out its role in the global stage, and working with the United States and other members of the Quad to figure out ways to push back against China. That'll continue as well.
Right. Since you brought up Quad, one observation that I recently actually came across was that it is not a binding agreement. It is not a defense pact. Do you think that there might be some hardening of this line as well, and in coming days India might actually benefit not only in pushing against China, but also trying to influence the region as well?
Well, you make a good point that the Quad is not an alliance, it's not a pact, it's a group of like-minded countries. But I think that the crisis in Ladakh has really, I think, brought home the importance of making the Quad work, just because one of the major the motive factors driving these countries in the Quad together is the shared sense that China's activities are concerning and threatening for the interest of all the countries involved. Until recently, you had holdouts, including India, that didn't want to be formally associated with this arrangement because of the fear that would antagonize China. But I think that these fears of antagonizing China have melted away among all of the members of the Quad, certainly in the United States, but India as well, and also Australia, which for quite some time had been hesitant to join in, worried about antagonizing China. But I think there's a new normal now, and I think that we could see that these countries trying to work more closely together rationalize the Quad. Now, what that actually entails, what that means, is a bit unclear, but the first step is to make sure all of these Quad countries are on the same page, and they are, and I think that's quite clear.
Right. One more question before I go to Ambassador, sir, very quickly. Let me ask you about world order, particularly because there is this impression that the liberal world order is on the retreat. Do you think that this is fait accompli now, that we'll have to live with such a kind of situation where human rights don't matter that much, where principles, ethics, morals don't matter that much, and only interests do?
Well, I think ever since the late 1990s, ever since the immediate years after the Cold War ended, we've been in this world where realpolitik reigns supreme. I think you had those glory days of democracy promotion and all that back in the 1990s. But that's long gone. And you look at the top leaders around the world these days, and these are not leaders that are interested in human rights issues. That to the extent that they're interested in them, they're interested in violating human rights. And you look at this authoritarian, this illiberal moment that we live in. We can talk about Modi, but we can talk about so many other leaders, including President Trump. There just is not any type of critical mass in favor of pushing for human rights promotion, which is another reason why it's hard to get the world's attention, quite frankly, on Kashmir, for that very reason, that the human rights arguments don't carry water in ways that they did 20 years ago and in earlier years as well.
Right. So basically fait accompli. Let me go back to Ambassador Zamir Akram especially on that depressing thought that this might be a fait accompli. Ambassador Saab, we are looking at a situation where you have rightly pointed out that earlier, if Kashmir was considered to be a problem or a dispute between India, Pakistan and the Kashmiri people, now a fourth country or party has entered the scene. And we know that at least three of these parties are nuclear, India, Pakistan, China. Do you think that the world can afford to ignore such an important nuclear flashpoint, sir?
No, it can't, and it won't, because as the things become more and more complex, and the confrontation between the United States and China increases, particularly you were mentioning the Quad, that is really, in my view, and a system or a group of countries that have ganged up to confront and contain China.